I didn't have a particularly successful career. I managed to sort of string it out for sort of 6 years. Of that 6 years, I was injured for 4 of it. I got a bad knee injury. I thought, that's it, career over.
I'm Jack Latus, founder and CEO of Latus Health.
We are an occupational health company. We deliver healthcare services into businesses. The easiest thing to do in any wellbeing program is look at sleep and hydration. You get those two things right in any workplace, you're going to improve wellbeing massively. Because the last thing you want is someone spending 30 minutes going for a walk at lunchtime, or say they're 5 minutes late back from their walk, and then their manager's on their back about it, or people are clock watching when they walk in. You've got to say, as a company, are we committed to this or are we not?
Hi, I'm Steve. I'm the Digital Director here at Spectrum Group. Today, I'm joined by the normal John Vanoom and Neil Wells. I'm also joined by the CEO of Latus Health, Jack Latus. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So with all that said, welcome to Tomorrow's Workplace Today. So welcome to Jack Latus from Latus Health.
Thank you for having me.
So for listeners, watchers, and for all of us, actually, do you want to just give us a bit of an introduction to yourself and what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm CEO of Latus Health, and we are an occupational health company. We deliver healthcare services into businesses.
Okay. And when you say occupational health, bring that to life for me and everybody else. So what does that entail?
So it is pretty wide subject, really. So we cover anything which is health related in the workplace. So whether that be looking after people's statutory health requirements, such as hearing tests, lung function tests, if you're working in an environment which is potentially harmful to health, right through to more of the sort of nice to haves in terms of well-being. So improving people's mental health, people's cognitive performance, and looking after them from providing GPs, physiotherapy, that sort of thing.
Wow. And what are if you're out speaking to business owners at the minute about kind of occupational health and well-being, what are the kind of key themes that are coming out of those conversations?
I think the most sort of obvious thing is the transition from it being seen as a nice to have or something that we just do for improving absenteeism and productivity, to now being a key part of like your employer brand or your EVP, because from that sort of attraction and retention point of view, it's now what people are looking for. People are no longer just looking for the salary as part of the package. They're expecting so much more from their employer to provide to actually attract them to the job and then retain them. And
of that kind of menu that you rattled off earlier, are there specific things that employees are looking for in terms of that EVP, as you say?
Yeah, I think probably the more popular things now is moving towards actually looking for actionable insight out of health testing. So there's quite a traditional model where, and you'll see this like companies like Bupa and Nuffield, where they go in and do the old classic sort of executive health check. But what they're doing is they're looking at delivering diagnostics, but they're not quite good enough diagnostics to actually find out if something's to be able to say you're definitely not ill. But then off the back of it, you're not really getting any actionable insight to make you healthier. So the issue with that is most people go spend 3 or 4 hours in a physician's office, do some tests, send some tests off to the lab, and at the end of it, they'll get a report back that says your BMI is a bit high and you could do to reduce your salt from your diet. And most people are like, I knew that already. I didn't need to waste 4 hours of my life doing that. So what we're now doing is using much better testing technology and to deliver much insight, and also looking at it on an ongoing monitoring basis, and then just actually giving people the actions they need to take to improve their well-being, and then tracking them, providing them accountability, incentivizing them, rewarding them, and the healthcare outcomes at the back of that are heaps better.
So how does that work then? So are we talking about wearable technology that can give that ongoing monitoring?
Wearables is certainly coming into it a lot more because it's so much more accessible. Everybody these days has probably got some form of wearable, whether they know it or not. And so you can tap into those things such as Whoop. Aura rings are really good. We're getting good quality HRV data. We can actually see whether people are getting stressed, overworked, and then we can make adjustments accordingly. You can do obviously sleep tracking. I mean, one of the key things, or the easiest things to do in any wellbeing program, is look at sleep and hydration. You get those two things right in any workplace, you're going to improve well-being massively, and most people don't look at those. I thought
that's the thing. I've never heard. I've heard of that, but never heard of it. The correlation to work, it makes absolute sense, but it's around. You don't, HR or whatever wouldn't necessarily, how are you sleeping or whatever, and actually, like you said, the output of caring about those two key sort of indicators is huge, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got to build a real environment of trust, first of all, because as a manager, think how good you would be able to be if you were able to actually see how people were sleeping and then speak to them, say, how can we help you as an employee? But to start with, you've got to get away from the issues where the employee's like, I don't trust you with my data. If you can get over that and people say, actually, it benefits me for you to see my data, or for the well-being champion within the organization to see the data, then all of a sudden it's like you're taking the brakes off to really improving people's health.
Creating transparency. So how are businesses achieving that? How are they getting their people to be open with that type of data?
I think everything starts with culture to begin with.
Okay.
So if you've got to work on building that culture of trust, and you can't do that on, just literally getting everyone together, having a great away day and everyone being like, yeah, let's go, we all trust each other. It's only going to come over time. And it's like any form of trust, it takes a long time to build, and you will break it with a second, won't you, in one action. So there's no quick answer to that. It's literally about getting your culture right, making sure everyone's bought behind the same mission, and seeing those little things, those like 1% marginal gains, which most people would consider sleeping well as, even though actually I'd consider it as a big gain. How those 1% gains make the organisation.
I'm failing on hydration and sleep.
To do it. I was going to say,
I'm sure it's not showing.
You could probably see it quite quickly if people that have had a baby, for example, young family, things like that. Because sleep straight away, I remember, it's only just in the last year that my son started to actually sleep through. I could argue that my performance hasn't been too bad, but still, the brain fog and things like that. And I did actually listen to someone that said, if you think about how long humans have been on the planet, millions of years, if sleep wasn't important, we'd have evolved to not need it, or need as much of it, 24-hour cycle.
There's a few people that genetically don't need as much, and they can get away with about 4, but the majority of humans need somewhere between 7 and 8 hours sleep. And there's actually a massive study that's done every year where and it's when the clocks go forward an hour, so we lose 1 hour sleep. Every time that happens, the incidence rate of heart conditions goes up the next day. Literally, heart attacks goes up the next day.
Seen that,
by I think about 23%. And then the reverse happens when the clocks go back, so we get an extra hour sleep. It goes the opposite way by 23%. So you can't get any better proof in terms of a study than that.
Brilliant data. We need to dig that data out. That's brilliant. I love that.
I watched a podcast actually. Have you seen that Liver King? He's quite an interesting brand.
Have you had him on yet?
We'll get him on. Absolute monster with a big beard. He's absolutely stacked, but he talks about his ancestral sort of premises and sleep and recoveries. His room, he has like all the electromagnetic sort of stresses taken out of his room. It's like his cave. He completely locks it down, dark, and he has even these sort of Faraday curtains to block out all the EMF. Sort of no cell phones, no nothing. He even sleeps on quite a thin mattress, so it's quite hard. But all about rest and recovery. But if you think about stress, you need your brain. Well, really, yes, you've got physical stress that your body needs to repair and recover. But in a working environment, if you're in a very stressful job, it's been able to switch off your brain, so you get that deep REM sleep that you need to sort of recover. And interestingly, the new Apple Watch is going to be better. You talk about wearables. It's going to track your sleep and actually monitor your heat and your heart rate and all that type of stuff. And they're trying to sell those benefits to. But you're right. Once we've actually got that data, could that be linked directly with a health coach or a professional like yourself that actually can advise and monitor a certain individual? Because if you look at some of the companies that you're working with, some of their employees, like for example, like the banks, and again, I'm not too sure I can name drop some of the customers that you've got, but again, some of the key earners, they're making millions for that business. They need those individuals working and again, very stressful environments, but they need them. They need them functioning.
Talk to us about intermittent fasting, because you're right. There must be 10, 20 people within this business that do it. So it's something you're passionate about.
I'm not sure if I'm passionate. I believe definitely for males, it's the way forward. I think some women can struggle with it. They can tend to get a little bit bloated. I'm not a nutrition expert, so please take this as you want. This isn't medical advice, but I do believe that it's much better. Your energy levels are much better. I think it's much better for calorie control. I think as humans, we're not designed to eat 3-4 meals a day. I think if we go back like 5-10 years when I was first working for you, in fact, Neil, in fact, that's a lot longer than that ago. I like to think I'm only 25. I'm not. It was, everyone was much more regular meals. That increases metabolism, and that's good for you. And I'm sure there's some benefits to that, but I think a lot more people now are moving towards and feeling the benefits from intermittent fasting.
And when we say, sorry, I should ask this first, but when we say intermittent fasting, just describe to people that aren't familiar with it what it is.
Yeah, it's effectively just having an elongated period of time where you're not consuming any calories. So I think that most people work towards sort of like a 16 and 8. So you have 16 hours where you don't consume any calories, which if you're sleeping for 8 hours isn't actually that tough. Yeah. Effectively, the ideal scenario is finish eating 3 or 4 hours before you go to bed, sleep for a good 8 hours, wake up, and you've got another 4 or 5 hours to do. So most people will elongate their fast through till sort of lunchtime. So don't have a breakfast, only consume black coffee or water. You probably could get away with maybe some amino acids if you really feel like you need to, and then have a lunch and a tea, good sized lunch.
It's where the word came from, break fast. Yeah. It's your first meal after you fast. If you actually trace the origins back, it doesn't mean just not what the Western world's been indoctrinated with, the Kellogg's, you have cereal. It's like, hang on, before Kellogg's came along with their millions of marketing budget and all the rest of it, what actually did?
Yeah. There are so many things that we do in our daily lives and take as normal that we don't realise are actually put there by amazing marketers. A lot of things, even down to, and again, I'm stealing this off another podcast, but there was someone who was talking about, it was one of the big, it was like P&G or someone like that, who actually brought in casual Fridays so that people wouldn't wear their suit all week. So they had to wear a different set of clothes on a Friday. Therefore, they would sell more washing powder because they had an extra set of clothes to wash. It's a lot of things in place which are, from marketing, and now we just take them as fact.
Link it to toothpaste. You can link it to all sorts. Again.
So I've seen both of you do intermittent fasting to varying degrees. You went quite extreme because the way you've just said it, Jack, it sounds doable to me. I don't mind eating, but I think I could. If we're saying that I can have a lunch, and as long as I eat before I go to bed at like 10:30, before 7:30, and then I don't eat till lunchtime. I don't have breakfast anyway. I could do that. I've never really considered it in.
I did it for 2 reasons.
Seriousness.
Maybe 3. So I was injured at the time, so there's an anti-inflammatory issue. So I had issues with my wrists and elbows. I felt I was too acidic, and I also felt I was just eating the wrong things. Too much beer, too much bread, that type of stuff. During COVID, I actually put on a bit of weight. I went up to 14 stone 2, which for me,
that's my
too
target.
Big. It's too big. So to put it into context, my fighting weight, if you like, is about 12'8". When I was lean. I've never been a fighter. That's all right. When I'm super lean, I'm 12'8", and I actually got down to 12'8" through the fasting. But I did take the extreme. I did a couple of days where I literally did. I think I pushed it 24 hours, maybe 36 hours without eating. I was just having water, but then I think I pushed it to sort of a 24, and I was only eating maybe 1 meal a day, but they were decent meals. But I didn't find it. I found it just fell off. It was natural for me.
And can you, being the novice out of the 4 of us when it comes to intermittent fasting, glad I got that out right. Mm-hmm. Can you eat normal meals? Like, obviously, there's advantages to even then cutting out, things like bread, etc. I get that, but if I was to follow that, I need to lose a bit of timber. But if I was to follow that, let's say for 3 months, and I appreciate you're not you might be actually an expert, so forgive me. But what if I do exercise as well? What sort of differences could I expect in what parts of my body, how I feel, or whatever?
I think a lot of it depends on the reason for you doing it. So I think my reason for doing it is for my daily performance. For a lot of the reasons I eat is for longevity. So I'm trying to think what's best at a cellular level to try and stop the aging effect on my cells. Therefore, I'll live for longer.
You're actually about 55, aren't you? I am. Looking good for 55.
Thank you. But obviously, if you're doing it from a body composition point of view, then you're still going to have to be understanding your total calorie consumption. If you're massively over consuming calories, and intermittent fasting, you're not going to get the fat loss or weight loss benefit that you're looking for. But I would like to think you'd probably still feel like you were getting the energy benefits. You might be getting some of the, the benefits at cellular level. But at the end of the day, you should still be consuming good food.
Yeah.
Like humans generally, the best thing we can do as humans is just stay away from processed food. Massively over-processed the food most people consume.
I'd argue as well, if you're exercising and you're burning, say, 3,000 calories a day, for you to eat 3,000 calories in one meal, or you'd struggle unless you're eating a lot of empty calories, because again, it's quite easy to overconsume carbohydrates, simple snacky type stuff. If you look at you see these big bags of Doritos or whatever, it's quite easy to demolish, or a full pack of biscuits. I know you're like a Jaffa cake dish, Jamie. So you look at the calories in a full thing, and it's like, okay. But if you was to eat like a big meal, I don't know, jacket potato, vegetables, chicken breast, steak, all that type of stuff, yeah, you'd be good going if you're going to eat 3,000 calories in one go.
Just steak it is.
But the calorie deficit is the main thing.
This is Matt. Matt is a finance director, and this is Matt's team. Day after day, they trudge through endless stacks of paperwork, like mindless zombies. But luckily for Matt and his team, things are about to get a lot better. Since Spectro has digitized their documents, there's no need for physical copies and duplicates to clutter up the office. And with a fleet of Spectrobots to take care of the mundane, Matt's team have changed the game. Don't waste the potential they've got. Get them a robot with Spectrum. Tomorrow's workplace today.
For listeners, watchers that are potentially owners, managers of businesses, what are the practical things that they can be doing to help their people in terms of occupational health and well-being?
First of all, you need to do your survey. You need to understand what people actually want. What are the issues you've currently got? So you need to, the same way you do an employee engagement survey to see if people are happy in the workplace, do some form of survey to find out if people, what areas they currently need support in. Once you collated that data, you can then structure your program. But the chances are you're going to find people will need some support around probably stress and anxiety management. So make sure that there's something in place where they can get the support they need when they need it. So access to quality counselling and CBT. My advice on that would be avoid like just a standard employee assistance program, because although they sound great on paper, most of them are massively oversubscribed now. COVID definitely didn't help that. So you got someone who needs counselling, for example, and they've got a 6-week wait. Well, for me, that's too long. That service is not providing what it's meant to. But then there's other options where you can potentially do, a lot of companies put mental health first aiders in place, which is sort of like a first line of support within the company. As long as they operate within their scope of practice, then they're a good start. Yeah.
And do you provide the training for that? So you will help?
Yeah, it's a simple 2-day training course, I believe, to become a mental health first aider. And it's good because it's good sort of development for someone in the organisation, gives them the opportunity to step up to the mark. Some people like taking on that responsibility. Yeah. I think one area people often forget as well within like the mental health side of things is we spend so much time focusing on like the support for when people have got an issue, but they forget to understand what can we do to actually improve the way the brain works. So we know that simple things that can improve people's mood straight away is more activity. Yeah, I mean, that's the simplest thing that anybody can do in any organisation is get people moving for any form of activity for 30 minutes a day. Literally reduces all-cause mortality by like 50%. It's ridiculous. If you, I say to people all the time, if you got in front of an audience, I say, if I could tell you that I've got a magic pill here, it's got 0 side effects, there's, take the conspiracy theories out the side of it, it's got 0 cost, and it will reduce all-cause mortality by 50%, would you take it? Unless you are a conspiracy theorist, you would be like, yeah, of course I'm going to take it. I'm like, that's activity. Do exercise 30 minutes per day, and you will achieve that.
And I think that's probably why the whole 10,000 steps a day thing's always been, and again, most sort of, exactly. So whether it be the government trying to push that, or whether it be the Apple Watch, just, I need to get my steps in and all the rest of it, close the rings and whatnot. But a lot of those initial or maybe older incentives that I've seen from healthcare sort of companies is let's do a step challenge. And again, it works because of what you just said there, getting people off the seat moving. I mean, we've had quite a few.
Drop off. So you've got to do it, and then it's got to be constantly pulsing out that message of increasing activity.
Oh, we've seen it there's definitely been some of our developers or finance staff, the people that are office-based that are quite sedentary, like sat down doing a lot of work. We had a couple of them up and they were either coming in before work, doing the circuit in the woods around the office, or they were doing it to and from work. And then as soon as the incentive finished, they just stopped and went back to, so it's how do you keep that as a habit?
Yeah, so what can we do as a business to encourage people to A, take a lunch break, and then B, during that lunch break or before, get out of the office, walk around, get some activity in?
Yeah, I think you can definitely look to incentivize it.
Okay.
So, the human behavioral psychology plays a massive part in health outcomes. And that's an area that we spend a lot of time thinking on and building into our health tech. The other side of it within a workplace is actually making sure that people feel it's okay to be doing that, because the last thing you want is someone spending 30 minutes going for a walk at lunchtime, or say they're 5 minutes back from late back from their walk, and then their manager's on their back about it, or people are clock watching when they walk in. It's just creating the wrong. You got to say as a company, are we committed to this or are we not? Because and it comes back to that sort of trust, really, But in terms of that incentivization model, I think it's key. And it sounds crazy that we have to incentivize people to get healthy, because why isn't healthy being enough? But once people start to feel the rewards in terms of the mindset and that good feeling you get from being healthier, they do tend to sort of carry it on. But if we take it even to outside of the workplace, so in our sort of MSK, our physiotherapy rehab programs that we put in place with people, whether it be workplace or whether it be, sort of NHS led. If you go, we would build a digital program for someone, so they're getting told what to do. They're getting video demonstrations of how to do it. We then build computer vision into it, so that the computer is actually assessing every rep that individual does. It's giving them real-time feedback, so coaching, so bend your left leg a little bit more, move your right leg more to the right, lift your right arm more. So it's literally picking up every movement using computer vision, which I think is a really underused tool, even within possibly health and safety in the workplace. But then because of that, you're getting proven fact that the individual is doing the movements. It's safe and it's quality. But then because they've proved that they're actually doing it, you've been tracking it, you can then reward off the back of it. So if that individual does all of their exercises, say they've got to do 5 exercises 5 times a week and they do them all, at the end of the week you can reward them. Here you go, there's a £5 voucher. But that's so much more efficient, because what happens with most people, you look at the NHS system, person has an operation, the physio comes and says, right, here's your exercise sheet. Or these days they might have improved it slightly and give them some exercises on a video if they've got a phone, a smartphone. And then 2 weeks later, that person comes back for an outpatient visit, which we don't need these days with the ability to do video appointments. We don't really need that outpatient visit, but they come back and do the outpatient visit. The physio says to them, how have your exercises been going? Have you been doing them? The patient says, yeah, I've been doing them. Yeah, absolutely. The physio knows you're lying. The patient knows you're lying. Everyone in the room knows we're lying. So then that 2 weeks has been a waste of time. So then the progress of that patient isn't as good as it should be. And the outcome's not going to be as good. So they're not, the recovery won't be as fast. They're going to be slower getting back to work. They're more likely to get re-injured. So the whole thing has a massive wastage in terms of time and cost, and especially with the massive backlog that the NHS has. That was tough to say. From a resource point of view, it just makes no sense. So if we invest in incentivizing people, we get better healthcare outcomes. And actually, we get a much better cost saving.
So you're combining a couple of things there. You're using tech to more or less build in that accountability side of it. Because really, if you look at trying to get people to change habits, change behaviour, the whole health and fitness industry is built around the whole personal training model, the whole sort of group classes. It's that accountability piece. If you don't have an appointment, or if you're not being watched, you're not going to do it on your own ultimately. And So you're saying you can use tech to obviously video someone if they're booked in, say, I don't know, 10 o'clock on a particular day, they do their exercises for 5 minutes, 10 minutes or whatever. You can use tech to see when they've done it, if they're doing it correctly, and actually gauge it. I don't know, say the program's 3 times a week for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever it is. You can very quickly see, and that feedback's sort of real time can be, I suppose, shared with the physio. And then they can critique, and because otherwise, like you just said,
need to be shared with the physio.
Well, true,
because the computer vision's doing everything.
Yes,
so it's using AI to decide, is that exercise being done safely and effectively and to the right level.
Yeah.
So you actually you're saving the physio time is done at the start, where they set the program and say, right, you've had this operation, or you've got this injury. We need to do these exercises to get this outcome. And then from there, it just rolls itself. You can then even set it up to do the progression itself. So it's right, you've completed a week of those exercises. You've completed them all to a score level of 90% and above. Right, you are now ready to progress. And that's just applying it to physio. You can then apply that to all other areas of health.
So go on. I want to ask you about how you've approached your sort of business in terms of, there's been a couple of step changes from sort of PT, boutique sort of PT studio into more of a gym.
Assistant to
me first. First, give me his first gig.
It was actually my second job. My first job was dancing on the bar in Hesel.
Yeah, we won't go there.
Teach you that as well?
Yeah, probably.
At least I was getting paid.
I know, I just did it for free, took my shirt off. No.
So to talk us through that career then, that's an interesting point Neil makes. Talk us through how you've ended up being the CEO of this kind of successful business.
Yeah, okay. So obviously, first career out of school was playing rugby. So I played rugby from Hull KR to start with. Then I went down to Harlequins Rugby League. Then I went to Rugby Union in Leeds, and then finished my career at York Knights back in Rugby League. I didn't have a particularly successful career. I managed to sort of string it out for sort of 6 years. I think of that 6 years, I was injured for 4 of it. In terms of the actual, if you add up all the time, I had a 6-year career, 4 years I was on the physio couch and having operations.
So, busy, yeah.
Which where you got your interest.
It's where I got a good understanding of what happens on the operating table and in the physio room. So when I got injured when I was at Hull KR, I was in a contract year there. I got a bad knee injury. I thought, that's it, career over. I wasn't a great player anyway. I was in a contract year. I thought there was no chance they're going to re-sign me. I actually thought they were going to re-sign me. Late decision, they decided not to. It was probably a good decision from them. And so during that time, I was like, well, I need to start looking at what else I'm going to do. The only thing I really knew was fitness and the gym. I became a professional rugby player because I just made myself the best athlete. When I was 15 years old, I watched Johnny Wilkinson kick the winning World Cup goal in the 2003 World Cup, and I decided right then I'm going to be a professional rugby player. And I wasn't the best player in my school team. Like, I was maybe the 3rd or 4th, probably not even that. I wasn't even in the county team. Literally, my mates used to laugh at me because I basically said, I'm going to be a professional rugby player. And they were like, no, you're not, Jack. Like, they ridiculed me for it. I was like, oh, that's fine. You do you. I'm going to do me. And I just set about every day. Before school, I'd go to, they used to have this really rubbish little gym at the top of the school old gymnasium. It's like one of those old universal multi-gyms. They'd have it like a YMCA. And I'd go and train on a lunchtime. I'd go out and do my speed work or kick goals. And on the evening, I'd do some form of training. So I put myself into pretty much from 15 a professional training program, like what an athlete would do now. So by doing that, and did that throughout my full career, that's all I knew. So I was like, I know I can help people become a good athlete. I was looking at what was happening over in sort of America and Australia within the sort of the fitness training scene, and I also knew that as a young athlete trying to make it, there was no one stop shop for getting your fitness training, your strength work, your speed work, your nutrition work. I had to go out and find all these coaches. In fact, Neil
did have different coaches.
Yeah, I would go and bring them all together, and so I was like, well, that's what we'll do. We'll set up an athlete performance program in a small gym. So we took a squash court at the YPI Sports Ground. So literally, 10 metres by 6 metres. I had about £4,000 to my name. My brother had a little bit of money, and we put it together. That's Sam, and we started this gym in January 2011. I had actually just got a contract to go down and play at Harlequins in London, so I was literally setting up this gym. So I'd come home on a weekend after playing a match. I would talk to the builders, say, right, I need you to do this over the next week. I'd go back down to London, they'd do it. I'd come home at the weekend and check that they'd done it all right, and then the thing would go again. Then I went to Leeds. So to start with, the gym was pretty a side hustle against my rugby. My rugby career was never great, but it was on the downward. And actually, once we set up the gym, we started to get a pretty good reputation. We did some qualifications to become sort of like the top 5% of strength and conditioning coaches in the country. So we started to attract some good athletes. We had sort of Olympians come in. We had professional rugby players, footballers, just based off what was a small, but we had a little bit of a name within the city. We definitely had a name for being good athletes, even if people didn't think we were very good rugby players. So we did that. But then when I came out of, I had no intention I had no interest in being an entrepreneur or business at all. I wasn't, you see like entrepreneurs at school and they're selling sweets and whatever. I was never like that at all. In fact, when I was we did Young Enterprise at school, and our team actually got to the second or third in the country. I was the mascot. We had a company called Tops Off, and we did customized credit card bottle openers. So the mascot was a bottle. So I used to dress as a bottle costume. I had no business intelligence at all. The funny thing about that is the MD of that, who's a good pal of mine, is now the chief ops officer for HelloFresh. So he's gone on to do that. The bottle's still the bottle, but
as a surprise, we've actually got the bottle.
You can wear it again.
You can probably find the pictures. I'm going to log into my Facebook,
That's
which I can't. I'll be able to find it for you. So I'm giving you lots of background. So essentially, we had this gym. As I stepped out of rugby and the gym started to do better, I started to actually get a real taste for business, and really the competition that I was lacking from, because I'd stopped playing competitive sport, started to come into business. So we started to say, well, we're not going to be able to build a particularly big business. There was me, my co-founding brother Sam, and then our elder brother Will had joined the team by this point. He was an ex-captain of the Marines. He came and joined us in 2014. And so we said, well, what we've got here is a program for improving human performance. Yes, we're using it to improve athletic performance. Actually, why don't we take this to all the corporates? We've got some big corporates locally. Let's take it to them and say we can improve the performance of your employees by improving their health. It sounded like a great idea. We went out there thinking, yeah, let's go. We're going to go. Everyone's going to love this, and everyone was like, we absolutely love this, but we've got no money. Yeah. We don't have a budget for well-being. At this point there was businesses didn't care about their employees at this point. I don't think that's true, but there was no well-being wasn't on the agenda, and there was definitely no well-being budget. So we're literally banging our head against the wall saying, God, guys, we're just selling a nice to have here. Everyone likes it, but there's no budget. What do people have to buy? And that's when we realised occupational health, there was this statutory requirement for some businesses to purchase it, and most businesses need it in some capacity. So we said, right, that fits in with what we do. It's still a health-related product. Let's go out and learn what occupational health is. So we did that. We built a clinical team, and then we grew from there. But what we'd accidentally done, strategically positioned ourselves perfectly for was, because we've had an awful lot of luck to get where we are, strategically we positioned ourselves accidentally where let's call it like the employee wellbeing revolution started, and it started to rise on the agenda. We were perfectly positioned to take advantage of that because we were probably the only occupational health company which was wellbeing first, because all of our other competitors were set up by nurses and doctors who were great at all the clinical stuff but didn't have a clue how to improve well-being and productivity and performance, that sort of thing. So that meant we were perfectly positioned to take advantage of that, and we just caught that wave.
I think that it's fair to say there's a bit of a north-south divide as well, because in the north, in London or the sort of bigger companies down south, again, or even international companies, they probably did have a budget for it. But where we are up in Hull, and again, you probably shifted quite nicely, because from PT, you were probably, a bit like myself, training the business owners. So again, I got the job at Spectrum because I trained the MD. So again, and then linking that through to actually manufacturing in Hull's massive. So let's segue and look at, well, actually, what do these lifting and handling, all those different things like that, and then from there. So I'm interested that over the last couple of years, it's jumped from just being local to being national, but also the headcount, your staff, the clinical. That must have been a big shift for you to go from the three of you to all of a sudden employing a lot of staff. You've gone from more of a strength coach, PT, to like you said, there's a big shift to jump to being a CEO, and I know from knowing you for a long time, there's that personal development side of things because you learn new skill sets. So you've had, from what I saw of Jack when he was younger, like you just said there, his mental toughness of what he wanted to achieve from, well, I'm going to train like an athlete before I've even got the gig. Yeah. I'm gonna. What do these guys do? Let's break it down. Well, let's put those actions in place, and then I'll get the end result. So you can apply that to business. What are those businesses doing over here? Let's see what they're doing, breaking it down, and let's put the right people in the right positions. But at the time, I think you had to learn different skills of marketing. Yeah. You had to get up and go and make it happen, and then bring in a team. And then that's a bit of a step change. So probably the last 3 years have been quite an accelerated growth for you guys.
Yeah. Could you just repeat that question?
So the question, I'll summarise it. How have you gone from, so the last 3 years, you've gone from strength coach short. So
I get your question, yeah. I think you're absolutely right that, so number one is, for me, has always been the ability to start with the end in mind. So this is the outcome I want. How do I achieve that and work back? So if we're looking at what we're doing now or where we are now, it was, right, we're a small business. What do we need to do to become a big business? I think that's a lot of mistakes a lot of businesses make is they want to become a £10 million a year company, but they're not prepared to put the infrastructure in place to become that. It's like, well, it's impossible, So, it's like saying we want to do 10 million a year in sales. Well, if your sales team don't have the capacity to do 10 million a year in sales, you're not going to do it. You have to physically increase that capacity first. So from a business point of view, that was definitely what I learned. Start with the end in mind and build with that. I'm an eternal optimist, which has always helped me. Like I say, I think successful people have that though. They have like an inflated sense of self. They have an inferiority complex, which, to use your word, John, creates that sort of dichotomy where you back yourself, but you're constantly saying, oh, am I good enough? So that constantly drives you on. And then the final one is impulse control, which if you think starting with the end in mind, you say, well, I don't want to do something today which sacrifices what I'm trying to do in 3 years' time. So those three things have been key. And the other point you tapped into there is about that self-development. And I just think it's the biggest thing. Everybody, I want to be careful here, I'm not sounding like Molly May, but everyone's got the same 24 hours. No, I disagree. But most people have got the opportunity to develop themselves. Everything you need to know is out there, has already been written. You just need to find out who's already done it, get them to teach you it, and then go and put that into your little map of the world, and then go out and find someone else to bring that into your map of the world, and you're constantly going to keep growing it.
Are there any difficult lessons you've had to learn over the course of that? Because you've been hugely successful. You've grown the business in X number of years to 80 staff, you were telling me. So any stuff that you'd share that you think, God, I wish I could do that again?
I think number one is would be understand that it's just as hard to grow a small business as it is to grow a big business. So start with that big vision and say that this is what I'm going to achieve. Number two would be the old classic comment, if you're going to go somewhere fast, go on your own, but if you want to go far, go as a team. So get a good team behind you. And that takes me on to point three, which is find really good people, because we used to try and do it with okay people, loyal people, and had this little band of merry men. And then all of a sudden you bring in an A-plane, and you're like, oh wow, that's what good looks like. And then your business goes boom. So you plateau, and you bring in a few good people, and it's here, and then they attracts more good people. Yeah.
That's great.
I want to link it, I guess, so we've talked about it in the past in terms of from what we talk about. So I'd sort of bring it into systemize, automate, and scale. So if a business needs to, you've got to have good systems, processes. We then talk to them about how you automate that, how you leverage that, and then ultimately, if you've got a scaling mentality and you want to grow quick, those two pillars sort of link that together. But also linking it back to healthcare and the NHS and healthcare providers. You look at how siloed the information is and data and systems, it drives me mental. I have to go to different people and repeat myself and go through all my health records. And again, you're trying to disrupt your industry because the occupational health has been quite it's been stagnated, I guess, over a number of years, and you're coming in it from a different, they are my words. They're coming at it from a different angle. But again, there's the thing like the blockchain, we spoke about that before, and just touch on your views on where that's going and also your vision for the future.
Yeah, so I think healthcare is definitely slow to adopt new technology. if we think healthcare is, well, occupational health is literally stuck in the 1970s. Our competitors are using like 1970s technology. And so when we came into the industry, we were like, wow, this is like ripe for disruption. And we're not particularly tech savvy people, or, you know, not particularly visionary, I would have thought. So we came into it and said, well, first of all, we want to make sure that we give everybody or every employee the care they need when they need it, wherever they are. And then want to make sure that we look at it from like a holistic point of view, because siloed is the best word. So you go to see your a healthcare professional, say you've got a knee injury. Okay, well, they'll come and look at you purely for what's the mechanical issue with that knee. They probably won't even look above and below the knee, but we won't get into that. Just look at it as a physical point of view. So they say, you need to go away and do these exercises. You go back to them again in, let's say, a month's time, and that knee isn't getting better. And they say, come on, you need to do your exercise. Well, the reason that knee isn't getting better may not be a physical issue. It could be a mental issue. You might be depressed because you're no longer able to do the physical activity you used to do.
Yeah, play football or whatever you love to do, golf.
Or you might even be seeing a counsellor for your mental health, which is then affecting that. But if you don't have the ability to look across the silos, as you call them, to say, actually, this is the full picture of this person's health, you're not going to get to root cause. So let's sort the depression out. Then all of a sudden you're feeling happy, you're feeling better. You do your exercises and bingo, the knee's better. But we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't looked out of that physical silo. So when we built Yoda, which is our digital healthcare platform, it's the world's first connected healthcare platform. And that's exactly what that connected healthcare platform means. We connected people's healthcare journeys, their full profile, so it's all accessible, subject to consent, within the click of a button. So if you've got a physio who wants to just check in someone's full notes, subject to consent from the employee, they can check in with what's happening at a mental health level, what's happening at different parts of their across their healthcare needs.
So you can pull in NHS records into that, or is it just stuff that I guess goes into the app?
Yeah, it says ours is the other way around. Actually, we update NHS records. Okay. So obviously, currently your NHS record is the only record that is meant to have all of your health data on it. So ours is the other way around. So we update into the NHS system. I mean, you touched on blockchain, and I think that the issue we have around blockchain is the fact that everyone just assumes it's just to do with crypto and Bitcoin and all of that, and actually, blockchain's been around for a good bit longer until Bitcoin sort of made it popular again. But for healthcare, it makes perfect sense. It makes sense to put the patient or the employee in charge and ownership of their own data, and they can then use that. They can actually leverage it potentially to generate their own revenue. You might have a study going on. You've got Pfizer doing a study. They're saying, right, we're looking for males between 25 and 30. So John puts his hand up and says, yep, I'll have a bit of that. Clicks the button.
I like it.
And says, I can take part in that study. And you click consent and they can access your data. It's temporary access and you can withdraw it post-study. If we look at it actually more from your side, or even just real world, and I've had this before. So I was with a clinic in Hull. I wanted to move my down to a clinic in London, and the process I had to go to get my medical data to that clinic was ridiculous for this day and age. It was ring up first of all and ask. Then it was, that's fine, but you have to come and sign a consent. I had to go in and physically sign a consent paper. There you go. Then they had to print them all out. They printed me out. I had to go in and pick up literally a doc full of, because you can imagine my medical history. Yeah. So I pulled those out. I then obviously to get them down to London, I then had to scan them back in. Wow. So, and then email them down. It's just ridiculous. That should all be stored in my own wallet, which, the click of a button, I can say, where's the best knee surgeon? It's in India. I want to have an online consultation with that person. Boom, there you go. Consent. You can see my data.
And how close is that to becoming a reality?
Within healthcare?
Yeah.
I would say a long way off, purely because of policy.
The technology is there, which is, exactly, it's policy. The technology is there. It's been proven. It's quite... But again, you look at anything that disrupts any market, it's down to the entrepreneurs and to make it viable, and the market wants it. I mean, frustrating. I remember my granddad just been in the hospital. You get one because again he had different ailments. So one's treating him for his diabetes, the other one's treating him for his pacemaker, and they're asking him the same questions. And it's logical. Hang on, I've just told that doctor that information. Why am I telling you the same information? And he was getting frustrated, and he wasn't techie, but it just made logical sense. Why do I have to keep sharing my information?
But do you think it could be, being devil's advocate, because I completely understand, I've had 3 letters arrive for a specialist appointment in 2 days for the same appointment, which is it's in the post, they could have emailed it, and B, they managed to send 3 for the same appointment, all the cost of, I'm one of however many tens of millions. But do you think it's a negative way to look at it from the NHS's perspective or health, but do you think it's just costs to changing? It's a massive iceberg, and actually changing the direction of that. The amount of money that they, bear in mind, they get lots of money. They waste huge amounts of money. But actually, to stop wasting it, they're probably going to have to spend more to stop it and redirect it. How? I think you straight away got to take a long-term approach to it. At some point, you've got to make that change. Yeah. They have. It's like when they do have an electronic medical record storage system at the moment. At some point, they had to move towards that, and it would have been a painful change. So that does have to happen. But you can't use the fear of the process. And I suppose that's the same with most workplaces. Most workplaces, and you talk about how to scale a business, most workplaces have the fear of, that's going to be hard work to get to that point. But it's that once you get to that point, you can then scale much faster. So do you want to go through 6 months of pain? I know it'd be a lot longer for the NHS, but within a business, say you bring in a new automated system, it might be 6 months of pain, 6 months of training, updating data, but then you've got this great product in place which you can then scale a business with. It's the same thing with the NHS. So it's like, yes, it mean they probably went over budget in year 1 and 2 when they're actually doing that change, but then that would probably massively reduce costs ongoing. Totally get that, and I 100% agree. I suppose I was just thinking while you were answering, I wonder whether it's a case of, because ultimately governments probably don't want to be held responsible. Whoever's in power doesn't want to be held responsible for, do you know what, it's going to go downhill for a bit, it's going to be an absolute storm, but actually at the end of it we're going to have this much better, much more digital efficient thing. And but you make a good point without getting into politics, which is dangerous ground. The government of the day that makes that investment, the next government is actually going to get the benefit from it. Absolutely right. And because we look at policy and decisions in 4-year cycles, or less than that, because we start to think about when are we going to get the votes. And I don't know a lot about different politics, but I understand the healthcare system. And even if you look at, everybody knows that we should be moving towards more of a preventative healthcare model. That is the way forward to catching disease earlier. Globally. We need to. No one would argue that that's the right move. The issue is it's going to take a very brave government to say we're going to move towards a preventative healthcare model, because to do that you've got to switch budget from reactive healthcare, i.e. looking after these people who are sick, to saying we're going to look after the people who are not quite sick enough yet. And that means you've got all these people over here where the budget isn't assigned who aren't going to be happy and therefore aren't going to vote. And that is the issue, that the people making the decisions are reliant on these people for the votes. And it takes a very brave person to make that decision. I'm glad. And I suppose
that links it right back to sort of the workplace, because for me, employers are employing people. So again, if we take, like any good entrepreneur or any business, we take full ownership of our people, our own destiny, our own journey. So let's put things in place to help the culture with, but also I know we're sort of getting close to the time limit, but I wanted to touch on the hybrid sort of workplace, how you sort of see that panning out in the future, because I know there's been a big shift. Obviously, the pandemic forced people to work from home. How did that impact people's health, mental health? How do businesses, moving forward with the hybrid side of things, how do they keep people engaged? How have you seen that been a bit of a transition? Yeah,
it's a good question. I think it's now that if companies were looking at putting in place, or they were putting in place wellbeing programs at work, now well-being they also need to focus on that well-being at home. Even simple things like how many people got sent to work at home, but there was no understanding of whether it was safe for that person to work at home. If you actually look at the number of people who have probably, if you want a really specific thing, got a C5 bulge now because they spent loads of time on the laptop on the desktop with the wrong height. You guys have all got fantastic screens here. You obviously had all your DSE assessments done here. Has anybody done that when they go home? So making sure people have got the right chair, making sure they've got the right desk, the right...
sat at the kitchen table.
And you saw people were sort of joking about it, on the ironing boards and things like that.
Yeah, they were putting cardboard boxes and the laptop
which was fine when we thought it was going to be like a 3-month thing. Yeah. Like COVID ended up being the best part of 2 years, which definitely led to burnout because the problem with burnout normally happens when there's no end in sight, and it got to the point where people are like, I don't know when the end of this is. Yeah. We even been at the forefront of it as not that we started it, but it's in terms of very much from the healthcare sector. We were thinking like 3 months on this. We were having our crisis talks and thinking, all right, we've got enough cash to keep paying everyone for 6 months. It's not going to last more than 3 months. We'll be fine. Some of our competitors will fall out and we'll nick some business. We were like, great. And then Rishi Sunak came in and saved the day and ruined our strategy. Go on, Liz.
That's politics.
Yeah. So, but no, essentially what businesses need to do is make sure that the same care that's available and wellbeing solutions that are available at the office, at the workplace, are also available at home. And that's why we're seeing this, and COVID did us a favour from this point of view. It transitioned businesses to starting to be prepared to receive their healthcare digitally, mainly because people got forced exposure to it. So, I mean... Our main product within Yoda is actually the ability to deliver all of our occupational health services, including like hearing tests, lung function tests, totally remotely. So we can now test everybody's hearing no matter where they are, well, really in the world, other than clinical governance across regions. But in terms of tech, we can now do that. So, and when we were first putting this in pre-COVID, people were like, no, we still want you to send your nurse to our site to do this appointment. And we're like, it's really not necessary. From an environmental point of view, we've got all those miles of travel for an appointment that could be done over a video call. Then when we started looking and saying, well, actually, we do have an environmental agenda behind what we're trying to do. The whole of the UK Healthcare Alliance is trying to get to net carbon zero by 2040. We said we want to be there by 2030, and we're going to lead the way within occupational health. So we started to review it and say, how do we give people access to the care they need when they need it, wherever they are, but without the environmental impact, and bringing those two together, almost as the problem we're trying to solve, brought us to Yoda, and has allowed us to really sort of disrupt the industry.
And that's an app, isn't it, that you've developed?
It's a web app. It's a mobile app for the employees to access, but it's also obviously. So that's the software part, but then we've also built the hardware and integrated the hardware to allow us to do the actual testing.
Yes, of course.
Last question from me, Jack, so I'm conscious of time. I need to let John go. But
he's got a job to do.
He's got a job to do. But yeah, the question I always ask guests is, the podcast is called Tomorrow's Workplace Today. So if you cast your mind forward 10 years within the healthcare industry specifically, what are and we've touched on some of this already, so you can summarise, but what are the key elements, I guess, of that industry?
Yep. Okay. I think the biggest change I'm looking forward to seeing is when we have the ability to engage in an immersive way with the best clinicians around the world. So, using virtual reality to do that. I also believe that as part of that, with the way that we can now create a full genome for someone, we can build a genetically identical digital twin. And then what we can do with that digital twin, effectively, we're going to be able to do practice surgeries on them. We're going to be able to see the effect of a particular prescription or drug on that digital twin. Wow. So you're going to get a lot better healthcare outcomes, because we're almost going to be able to do like a dress rehearsal
practice
before and speed. The same way if you were testing, I don't know, a food product, you might say, right, to test the sell-by date of this food product, we're going to put it in an oven, heat it up, and that's going to be the equivalent of 2 years of shelf life. We're going to be able to do that with a digital twin. We're going to say, right, if we put this in place, this exercise prescription or this drug prescription in place, and what's the difference for that digital twin in 10 years time at this dosage, is going to allow us to be so much more accurate.
And it brings it into that sort of digital hospital, like you say. We've talked about it where, you want to see an appointment, or you can put on the headset like you see with the metaverse and all that type of stuff. But if we said about before, we think if Apple, for example, don't know if it's in the pipeline, but probably is. If they bring out a headset,
they'll release it.
And I think that's going to be a bit of a step change. And I think from there, like you say, you're already thinking about that development. And I wanted to link it in with you did an interview with Bernard Marr, didn't you? And he's obviously very big into tech, futurism, and that type of stuff. So if people do want to sort of know a little bit more about it, you go into a bit more detail on there. But again, that development actually. A digital hospital, so you can literally put something on and go see and speak to the different consultants is definitely on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely.
And something you're actively trying to develop.
Very much so. It's almost the best way we can see to democratize high quality healthcare, because especially as the cost of VR comes down, I don't think it's coming down as fast as people think. I think the fact that Meta are subsidizing the Oculuses and helping people think, it's like $300 for a headset. It's like, no, it's not. But I do believe that is going to be the best way to give people access to high quality healthcare, and you'll be able to get it to, and you'll be able to reach the best practitioner in the world. And I'm very excited about the Apple release, because the problem at the moment, I think, is a lot of these headsets, people are like, I don't want to wear that, I can't see that. Yeah. Whereas you'll see the Apple one and you're like, oh wow, now I get it. So you're going to get this. I think that's really going to be the catalyst to transition towards mainstream use of VR. Because we know that Apple build products that delight customers, and you're like, oh well, that's nice, and you're not going to be afraid to have it on. I think once they've released that, probably within a couple of years, it'll be norm to be sitting on a train on your way down to London or something, and you'll see everybody with their headsets on doing this, tapping away on the table on the train, because obviously their computer screens will all be within this virtual reality or augmented reality. I think Apple will be more towards augmented, because I think the one problem with virtual reality is you feel very vulnerable once you've got those goggles on, because you're in your own little world, and in a public space you're going to be concerned about someone coming in.
But it links into adoption of technology. If you think about COVID, it forced people to go video, especially for health benefits. You actually, instead of people going to the GPs, they were having video or telephone conferences with the GP, and it became the norm. And the same with us, like when we're having conversation, normally we'd go have meetings, and now it's Teams or Zoom or whatever. It forced that adoption. So now you've got that trend and that shift. I think it's going to accelerate.
And I think you're right. I think Apple's product could be the catalyst for that.
It will remove that two-dimensional disconnect. So video calls are great, but there's nothing like being in the room with in our industry, with your clinician. And VR, once people start to experience it, it is immersive. You're talking currently to an avatar, but if we were in this room virtually now and Neil was speaking and I've got my VR on, I'm turning to look. Is what you do, and it feels a lot more real life than you think.
Jack, that's been brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Cheers, guys.